Love bass fishing and wondering how to fish a Texas rig? You're in the right place. In this step-by-step guide for Texas rigged worms for beginners, I'll walk you through how to rig both weighted worms and weightless lures like flukes and senkos, then show you how to fish them effectively in cover. And most importantly, I'll teach you exactly what a bite feels like so you'll know when to set the hook on that big bass. So everyone knows that a Texas rig is one of the most effective rigs out there for catching bass. The problem is it can get really complicated and it's tough to know what a bite feels like when you're starting out. So I'm going to simplify it. I'm going to show you two lures that work all spring and all summer, an easy way to set these up, how to rig, and we're going to go through that really fast, give you the basics, let's not get too complicated, and then I'm going to take it to the water, show you footage of me fishing it, show you exactly how I fish it, when I'm getting a bite, what a bite feels like, how to set the hook, how to work it through cover, and where to fish it. So what is a Texas rig to begin with? It's simply a way of putting a soft plastic lure on a hook so it's weedless. That's why it's so good. You can fish it through lily pads, through a lay down tree, through the heaviest cover. It comes through and very rarely snags. And guess what? That's where bass live. That's why it's so effective. You can fish it weightless with no weight and it falls really slowly. Or if you want to get it down deeper or get into the cover, you can fish it with a sinker. So this is a traditional weighted Texas rig, or the other one is a weightless Texas rig. So starting off, let me show you how to rig these really quickly, and all the items I'm going to talk about are in the description, so if you want to use the exact baits and hooks and everything else, it'll be right there. All right, so let's rig the weightless Texas rig. So for the jerk shad, I'm going to use an extra wide gap style hook. A 4/0 works out really well. So you want to start by making sure you come through the exact middle of the head, come to the top of the head in the very middle, push it in past the barb, say about 3/4 or 3/8 of an inch, and bring it straight out. Slide the head of the worm past the Z bend on the top up to the eye of the hook, and you see that holds the nose in place. So now I take the hook and measure how far back in the bait it comes. I mark the farthest part with my thumb, and then come up through the middle of the bait, again coming through the very middle and straight out the top, right where my thumb is. The hook comes straight up through and out the top. If you bring the hook through too short or too long, you'll notice that the worm doesn't lay flat. Just pull it back out, measure again, and try over. Once you get it right and the worm's laying perfectly, take the hook point and you'll notice there's little slots on the top. This holds the hook point and allows it to stay weedless, but then it tears out when you get a bite. Pull the bait forward and then slide the hook point through those little slots. That keeps it weedless. Now a perfectly rigged bait is nice and flat, and when you look at the top, it's in the very center, and the hook point is in those slots, so it's not going to grab any lily pads or any weeds, but it's going to come out when you set the hook. Now to rig the weighted Texas rig worm, you're going to need a couple extra components. You'll notice I still have the hook rigged weedless, but there's also a weight, a sinker. This happens to be a lead one, or you can use tungsten, and then there's what's called a bobber stop up here as well. You can get the bobber stop at a tackle store. You slide that onto your line, and then you slide on a sinker, a bullet weight sinker. And I use an 1/8 up to a 1/4 ounce with a 7-inch power worm. When fishing the worm, I like a straight shanked worm hook. The hookup ratio is a little better, and I think it comes through cover better. So to rig it, you're going to come through dead center, the top of the worm, bring it past the barb in about 3/8 of an inch, and then out the side. These power worms have a small seam that runs right down the length of them in line with the tail. It's going to be hard to see with your eyes, but if you bring the hook point out the seam and then bring it back through the seam, you can make sure that you have your worm perfectly straight. Slide the worm up over the keeper, up to the eye of the hook, and the keeper on your hook, on a worm hook, is going to keep it from sliding down. So your hook should come out on the seam at the top, and now you're going to take the hook point and put it straight into the seam farther down the worm. So find the seam with your hook point, and then scrunch up your worm just a little bit, push it into midway through the worm, and it should be straight. It's important that your worm is totally straight, and I like when you do it on the seam, the worm tail will be pointing either straight down or straight up. And you can see the seam right here on the top and the bottom. So use the seam either on the top or the bottom. I prefer to have it with the tail down, but it'll also work tail up. If the tail's to the side, it's going to want to pull to one side or the other. So try to have that worm straight up
or straight down with the tail. You notice the worm sits totally straight. It's not going to roll over when I'm bringing it through cover. It's going to swim true. It's in a straight line. If you scrunch it up a little too much or not enough, you're going to get like a humpback looking worm that's not straight. It's kind of curved here. It's not going to be straight on the hook. This is an exaggeration, but like that, that's not straight. If I pull it too tight, it's going to look, the hook point's not going to sit in there. So measure where the hook point goes in, scrunch it up just a little bit, push it through the middle of the worm, make sure the hook point's not sticking out. It's riding in there enough so it'll stay in there, but not come out. So basically push the hook point halfway through. So now you see that this bullet weight slides up and down. I want to peg it so it'll get down into the cover. The bobber stop on my thumb here, I want to take that and slide it down the line to right in front of the sinker. Now the sinker can't move. It's going to fall down into the lily pads, into the lay down trees, and get into the cover. I like to peg it all the time. It just gets to the bottom of the cover where the big fish live.
One other question you have that can get really complicated, but let's keep it simple, is what color to use. Use something green. Anything that's greenish, fish will eat it. There might be a better color, but there's definitely worse ones. They always eat green stuff. So now that we have the baits rigged, let's talk very briefly about the gear to throw them. Now both these rigs you can throw on a spinning rod or a bait caster. I typically throw them on a bait caster, but I'll give you the spinning alternative as well. For the weightless Texas rigs, I like a 6.5 to 7 foot medium power rod. And that's for a spinning rod or a bait caster. Now on the bait caster, I go with a little bit smaller size reel because there's no weight, obviously. So to throw it, a smaller reel works out better. This happens to be a Xenon X. So it's a little bit smaller, makes it casting a little bit easier. And you can throw this on a spinning rod with 8 or 10 pound fluorocarbon. On a bait caster, I'm going to use 10 to 15 pound fluorocarbon. The more cover that I have, if I'm around lay down trees and a lot of grass and stuff, go to 15. More open water, go to the smaller line, so the 10 in a bait caster or 8 in the spinning. Now the Texas rig, you need something just a little bit beefier, and you need a rod that's able to drive that hook point more through the worm to set the hook. In this case, I go to a medium heavy, a 6.5 to a 7.5 foot rod. I really prefer a 7 or 7.5. And then it's medium heavy power, and I go to 15 up to even 20 pound test. If I'm in really thick cover, a lot of wood or a lot of grass, I go to 20 pound. The lighter the 15 casts better and is easy to handle. If I'm using this on a spinning rod, I'll go medium up to a medium heavy spinning rod, probably about a 6.5 to 7 footer. And then I'll use about 10 pound fluorocarbon line on the spinning reel. All right, so let's talk about the baits. And like I said, these are two baits that'll work year round, but really in spring and summer, these are fantastic. They're going to work on pretty much any lake. Let's dive into them. So for the weighted Texas rig, a Berkley power worm, this is a classic fish catcher. It's a ribbon-tailed worm. It's 7 inches. It's small enough that fish will still bite it when they're finicky, but it's big enough that you'll still catch big fish on it. It's the perfect all-around size. The ribbon tail is a classic. It just has a nice rippling action when it falls. It seems to attract the big ones. It's thin enough you can set the hook easily, and it comes through cover so well. This is a killer late spring through summer. If it's windy, I'll go up to, say, a 1/4 ounce bullet weight. If it's really calm, you may get some bites, more bites if you go to an 1/8 ounce. And pretty much a 3/16 is in the middle. That works all the time. I will say this, when you're new, you want to be able to feel it on the bottom. So make sure if it's windy or if you're just new at it, go with that heavier weight. You're going to be able to feel it better. That better feel is going to tell you if you're getting a bite or not. So I would start out with a 3/16 or maybe a 1/4. Now that weighted Texas rig works really well in two cases. If they're in the cover, if they're down in the bottom of the lily pads, if there's lay down trees and they're down in it, that Texas rig is going to get your bait down in there. And sometimes they're feeding on the bottom. They're kind of looking down more so. In that case, the worm's going to be better. Other times they're eating minnows and shad and baby bluegill, all that stuff towards the surface, and they're feeding more up. That's where the weightless baits are just so classic. And this is a power bait jerk shad. It's a classic jerk bait shape here, and it falls with no weight. It falls super slowly, so it stays above them. It looks like it's so easy to get. And the neat thing is when it's falling, it'll kind of just naturally, it falls and then it darts a little bit and the tail wiggles. You can see when I'm just holding it here. It's always moving. So even when it's not moving forward, it looks lifelike. So that slow dying fall, if they're feeding up, go with the worm when they're on the bottom. You pretty much have it covered. If you try the two of these, they're going to be biting one or the other almost every day. All right, enough sitting in the classroom listening to the boring teacher. Let's take it to the water and go catch some fish.
Okay, so here we are in the water. You notice I cast this one out, and this happens a lot of the time, about a third to half the time. On the first drop, when you first cast it out there, you get bit right away, and you watch. I pick up my rod tip, and you see it kind of loads up. It starts flexing before I figure out there's a fish on there. You want to be ready when you're worm fishing. A lot of the time, on that very first drop, one's going to get it on that initial drop. So the first time you pick up, be paying attention. That's when a lot hit. You see, I'm fishing around shallow lily pads here. There's flooded grass on the bank there, and then there's cattails on the shore. In this particular case, they're kind of right at the edge where that bank grass meets the lily pads. But the cool thing is about that worm, that Texas rig, I can bring it right through all that thick cover, and that's where they're living. Anytime you get late spring into the summer when the grass and the pads start growing, it's a worm is just a fantastic option. Pretty nice fish here to get me going, and that's a good way to start the day. Now this is over to the jerk shad here, and same deal. I throw it out there, I twitch it on the surface a couple times, and one hits it right away. Now, you know that it doesn't get to the bottom, it's on the top, but for whatever reason, when it first hits the water, those baits, that's when they eat it. And around cover, that's the one thing I'll say that bass live around cover, whether it's weeds or lay down or whatever, you always want to be casting around cover. Now here's the jerk shad again, and again you can see me throw it to the cover, and I twitch my rod tip. I'm holding it down with the jerk shad. It's just twitch, twitch, and then I let it fall down. That thing, as soon as I twitch it a couple times, boom, comes and gets it. You're always working that jerk shad, rod tip down, just a couple twitches, make it kind of dart left and right, and then it falls down so slowly. Now these two clips should really help. I throw this one out, this with the worm. You watch, I let it fall to the bottom. I pick up my slack, let it sit on the bottom for a second. I lift up, see my rod kind of flexes, and I swing and I miss on a fish there. So I have the power poles dropped in my boat, which are the anchors. I'm not going anywhere. So I cast it back out there, and this is how I work the worm and feel for bites. So when it first goes out on a slack line, let it fall to the bottom. Let it sit there for a second. I'm letting it sit, I don't know, 5 seconds at a time. Then you slow pick it up. I'm feeling for the resistance of that worm. It's a little hop, and each time I kind of weigh it. Is it heavier? Is it lighter? And if it feels strange, I'm going to put a little pressure on it until I feel some weight. So I lift it up there, don't feel anything. Lift it up here, don't feel anything. Let it go back to the bottom. Make sure you let it go to the bottom every time. You're kind of looking around. Now watch here in a second. See how my rod tip kind of loaded up? I felt some weight there. It just felt heavier. I held it in place for a second, put a little more pressure, and when I feel more pressure, you feel a fish moving. If it's a stick or a lily pad, it's not going to move. If it's a fish, he's going to kind of pull. You're going to feel a little pulse or a throb. That's a fish, and it's time to set the hook. And now back to another wormfish. See, I cast it in there, let it go to the bottom. And I'm not in as much wind here, so I'm holding the rod a little bit higher, but you lift it, and I'm kind of just shaking it up a little bit each time, weigh in to see if there's pressure there. And again, it was hard to see, but the rod tip, it just got heavier. You see it loaded up a little bit, even with the smaller fish. You're just going to feel that little bit of extra weight. So basically, every time you're picking up on a Texas rig on a worm, you're feeling for how much it does it weigh. And that's why I like that heavier sinker, because it's a little bit easier to tell on a heavier sinker than a light one. Now here's worm fishing again from a little bit different angle. Again, you can see the lift drop and lift drop. The problem most people have is they set when they're not sure if there's a fish or not, or there is a fish and they don't set the hook. The thing is with a worm, a lot of lures they'll spit it out as soon as they feel. With a worm, they're going to hold on to it for a long time, so you have extra time. You don't have to worry about them spitting out. If anything, they hold it too long and they swallow it. But when you think that you have something, I put a tiny bit more pressure. If it's a snag, I just lift up a little harder. If it's a snag, it's not going to move. You let back down and bring it up. Oh, that's a snag. I come over it. If it's a fish, you put a little pressure, you're going to feel the fish. Now, this is a great view of the jerk shad. I'm keeping my rod tip higher. Remember, we're trying to fish this above the fish. So I'm scurrying it. I'm reeling fairly fast. I'm twitching the rod. I want to make it twitch left and right with some slack and line so it's twitching and darting. and one comes up and gets it. Once you feel it, you reel up till it's tight, and then you set the hook hard. But the main thing is you want it to be like a minnow that moves pretty quickly. Move it 3 to 10 feet, twitch, 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 like real fast, make that thing dart and move like a minnow that's trying to get away. And then you pause it a second. It's going to fall down just a little bit, just this great slow dying fall, and then reel it and twitch it a couple times again, another 5 feet, and kill it. I'll do that like 3 or 4 times on the way back to the boat, then cast it out for the next one. Now this is a great sequence here. It'll be 2 casts. You can see how I reel fairly quickly. I twitch my rod tip, making that jerk shad dart and stop. Throw it out again. And watch when I come along here, see the rod tip, the tip of my rod will kind of just bend a little bit. That's because I'm feeling some weight on it. I keep twitching it, stopping right there. It bent a little bit. I missed that fish, but you can see how I'm working the bait. Now I come back with the worm and I throw in the same area. Now this is rod tip up still, but there again, I'm back to lift drop. I'm picking up, and you saw I kind of hesitated there. The rod tip bent over, and sure enough, I throw right back to the same spot, and I get that fish. It happens to be a pretty good one there, but that's the difference. That jerk shad, the weightless Texas rig, you working that quickly across the top and let it slow fall down to the bottom. You could let it fall all the way to the bottom, but I prefer to fish a worm when I'm doing that. I'll twitch it, and if that's if they're feeding up top. And a lot of times, fish that miss that jerk shad, if you throw that worm right back in the same spot, well, look, you catch a great big one. So it's a great follow-up bait. Don't just throw that same bait in there again. He probably got turned off by that one. You know where he was at. Throw back to the same spot, and you catch that big one. And there's something about that 7-inch worm. It's just a classic size. Like I said, it's big enough to catch big ones, and it's small enough you still get a lot of bites. You see, I'm catching some little fish and big ones. I just love it for that. And this is one I saw one up on a spawning bed. If you're around the spring, you see them around there. The Texas rig worm, you pull that worm into a spawning bed, as long as you don't fall out of the boat like I almost did there. It's a great way to catch spawning fish too. But you notice there, I'm sitting and twitching it in front of them, and they just can't resist that worm when it's just kind of slow moving and dragging in front of them. And again, if you look at that video there right before I set the hook, you notice that the rod tip just kind of loads up, bends a little bit, and then I set the hook. So then finally, let's talk about where to fish this. I'm back to the jerk shad here. You see I'm fishing a little bit slower. I'm popping it, letting it pause, pop. And then sure enough, one goes ahead and eats it. You can't see it in this. It's off on the right side of the picture. We'll see it here in a second when I switch back to the worm. But again, the fish love to get around something. So there's flooded grass up on the shore, and then there's the lily pads. What seems to be the key so often is right where 2 different types of cover meet. So it's the flooded bank grass meets the lily pads. They're not way out in the lily pads. They're not way up in that flooded cover. They're right on the edge of it. And I'm pulling my worm right down the side of it. This one, I go ahead and hit the quick release button on him. Oops. Like I said, the best advice I can give on worm fishing is they hang on to it for a long time. So don't be in a rush. If you feel something, to tell if it's a snag or a fish, put a little more pressure on it. A snag is not going to pull back. Just ease up your rod, let it back down, and you'll come up and over it with that Texas rig. If it's a fish, you're going to feel him pull, and it's time to set the hook.